If you click this video, you may have been intrigued by the title. I somewhat take unconventional views or positions on everyday events and activities that we partake in this country. I'm recording this on what has been a very hotly contested election season. You've got people running for attorney general, people running for governor, and many important positions within the government. And I'm here to tell you that despite all this, I hope that whoever you support, you get to wake up in the morning or see later on tonight, whenever the ballots come in, that the candidate that you wanted was elected to the position that you wanted them to be elected to. I have no dogs in this race. The position that I take is that in this life, we have to learn to pay less and less attention to the news. Now, I know you may think that it would be crazy to go around in the world uninformed about the events that are taking place. But I would submit to you to say that the events that are taking place in the world generally are events that would happen regardless of whether you decide to be informed about it, and definitely would happen whether you decide to be stressed or not about it. All that is irrelevant. And I will use the frenzy that was stirred up about the possibility of families not receiving SNAP benefits because of the government shutdown. Now, my heart goes out to any kid that goes hungry. Anything that goes against the kids is something that I really don't tolerate very well. But when it comes down to how the news portrays these events and how they get us all worked up, we're all about to cancel Thanksgiving and Christmas because the government is not doing their job in providing the benefits that they're supposed to. And we make all these think pieces, have all these water cooler discussions around the workplace, discussing events that, from what I understand at this moment, have not even taken place. Imagine how much time and mental energy you could have conserved towards keeping your eyes focused on the road ahead towards your goals. Now, I don't want to come across as a person who is a hustle culture, YouTube philosopher, but I am very aware and very sensitive to the power of attention and intention. And the news has been one of the most subtle ways that our attention is stolen. And we don't even realize it. We all tend to believe we don't have enough time in the day. But how much time do we waste? Not only watching TV, watching YouTube, watching other people's lives and being nosy. All that attention is time that adds up that we could be spending working on the things that we deem important. I would even say that in this lifetime, we're not even taught to prioritize what is important and what isn't for ourselves. Someone else is always attempting to tell us what we should be mindful of. And many of the things that we're told to be mindful of are things that we can't control, we can't impact in the slightest. I often think back to my youth where I was so eager to make a change for some of the injustices that went on in the world, only to be met with apathy from the people who I perceived to be suffering from the injustice. Or, as a person who has traveled all over this country, I've been to many different places in the world, only to find out the way the news portrayed these places was so far from the truth that it was really ridiculous. The news can discourage us from doing certain things and having experiences that maybe we're meant to have, but because of this prejudiced idea that is planted in our head by someone else, we close ourselves off to a lot of decent, amazing experiences. Stop watching the news, guys, or at least limit your exposure to it. Because knowing what's going on across the world can be a nice conversation piece. But at the end of the day, when you strip all the layers away, it's a distraction. It's to put you in a certain frequency, in a certain mind frame that leaves you with less energy to be impactful in the world. We all have an area of concern and we have an area of influence. And where those circles meet in the middle is the area that we can control. If I got that right, that idea comes from a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I read that book while I was deployed in a war zone some 15 years ago. And it was really one of the first books that I read on my self-improvement journey that allowed me to see how important our attention is, and where we direct our attention is what tends to manifest in our lives. We can always find areas that need improvement, but at the same time, we can always also find areas to be grateful and express gratitude for. And I've come to realize through my experiences of life that we need to spend more time on the side of gratitude than we need to spend on the side of worry. And the news puts us all squarely on the side of worry. But worrying about what? I'm not the most religious man in the world, but when I listen to your pastor, or when I listen to the sanctified saints who go to the churches every Sunday, the ones who are all in attendance, absorbing this word, and going out into the world and regurgitating these verses that they hear, the bottom line is that I always hear that God is ultimately in control. But yet, after we leave church, after we get done praising, we turn to the news and allow a news anchor to tell us about the potential negative impact of certain legislation, or tell us about how our neighborhoods are unsafe and it keeps us closed inside, never going outside. Now, I'm not saying that there's no truth to some of the things that are being said. You always have to keep your head on the swivel, no matter where you are. Watch your six, as they say in the army. But at the same time, as a capable adult who's going out into the world not with the intention of attracting any negative energy, I believe that we, 9 times out of 10, will be fine. There's no reason to be shut in indoors, taking in the bad news, and pointing our finger at any and everybody else who's outside, labeling them as something that they may not be. I know for me, just because of my skin color, there are people who will automatically label me a criminal. And I'm fine with that. You can label me whatever you want, but I can't allow someone else's label of me to determine how I move and how I behave out in the world. The news, it gives us too much influence. We're influenced too much by the news to the point where we can't even see the world through a clear lens. And again, I know this conversation could be somewhat controversial, but it's something that we need to take into consideration if we want to live happier, healthier lives. There's too many discouraging talking points that we hear from people who are simply reporting the news. And as I always say, people who report the news would probably much rather be out making the news, Why read the headlines when you can make the headlines? And we've got a bunch of people who are reading teleprompters, trying to give us a concept of the world that may or may not be true. I've always, since a child, been a person who has to see for himself. I could take your advice. I could use some guidance from time to time. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have to burn my own hand on the stove to really be sure that it's hot. Now, that may be a flaw of mine. As they say, fools rush in where wise men never go. But at the same time, who wants to live their life caged in by the opinions and thoughts of someone else? Especially when that someone else hasn't lived the life that you want to live. And that, to me, is where the problem of the news comes in. And we're not even getting into the whole political slants and angles that how these stories are spun before they come to us. We really, honestly, at this point in time, don't have any idea what's true and what's false, because there is an agenda from everybody who's reporting the news. Everything has to be spun a certain way because they want a certain reaction from their base. With all that being said, instead of spending all day trying to peel back the layers to determine who is who and what's what, spend that mental energy, that physical energy, that energy that you spend worrying on building and designing the life that you want. If there's one thing I can say about our current president, or anybody who reaches that level of fame and notoriety or that position of authority, is that while it can be useful to understand what's going on the outside world, but at the same time, the outside world doesn't bear as much of an impact on their potential progress as most of us in the everyday average lane of life would allow it to impact us. I just think about the fact that if, say, a Donald Trump were to allow the negative opinions that people hold of him to dictate how he lived his life, he wouldn't be where he is. If your favorite celebrity took all the negative criticism and decided to just stop where they were, they wouldn't be who they are. I think back to athletics whenever I have this kind of conversation. And I think of how there are favorites and there are underdogs. And there are teams in all professional sports, whether it be the major ones we have in the United States, baseball, football, basketball, even hockey. You could find countless examples of teams that weren't predicted to do as well as they did, but against all odds, they showed up on the playing field, put their best foot forward, and shocked everybody. Many of us are afraid to get out on the field of life and play the game because we have people in our ear. Could be friends, might even be family. It's probably a lot of coworkers that discourage us, try and make us limit our potential and live a smaller life than we're capable of. And we don't pursue things that we probably should. The news is one of the biggest culprits that fills that role in everybody's life. Sometimes you have to ignore the negative headlines and get out on the field and play anyway. So again, even though this message may run counter to my own benefit, me telling you to stop consuming media, whether it be the news or anything else that would discourage you from doing the things you want to do or getting the things you need to get out of life, even though that message goes against my best interests, I would just say, ignore the headlines, stop watching the news, and go out on this field of life. Go out in between the lines and show who is who And what's what? The news is one of the biggest culprits that discourages us from ever even taking the chance to do that. I would love to hear what you think about not watching the news. I know this may be a controversial position to take, and I understand that. And I'm welcoming of any feedback that may come due to this message. But that's the position that I take. Stop watching the news. Go out here, set your goals, and make things happen, despite all of the noise that surrounds us all. If you made it this far, I appreciate you for watching this video. Hopefully, I will catch you in the next one real soon.